I'm David, and it's time for some daily bread. When the Apostle Paul wrote the letter to the church at Rome, we know several things. Number one, we know that he had never been to Rome before. Number two, he wanted to go to Rome and visit them. And third, we also know how and when he planned for that to happen. We get that little insight there near the end in Romans 15:24, where he talks about he's got these plans to go to Spain, no doubt to preach the gospel. And then as a part of that journey, he planned to stop off and to see the church and preach the gospel in Rome as well. Well, we know from our study of the book of Acts and from epistles that Paul wrote that things didn't go as Paul planned, did they? He did make it to Rome, but certainly not in a way that he had ever dreamed that it would happen. There are lots of examples from Paul's life of things not going as he wanted them to go or that he planned for them to go. But I think the thing I want us to remember about this or take note of here is that Paul, even though he didn't get to do things the way he wanted to do them and things didn't go according to his plans, look at what did happen. What happened instead was Paul ends up getting arrested and he's imprisoned on trial, very lengthy process. He appeals to Caesar, has this harrowing journey by ship to get to Rome, and then from Roman imprisonment, where the book of Acts ends, him in prison. We put together other pieces of the puzzle of what happens then through the rest of Paul's life. But as a result of what happened, some of the great sermons that Paul preached were a part of that trial process, and they're recorded for us in the book of Acts. We learn so much from Paul's journey to Rome and what a harrowing experience that was, and that encourages our faith. He gets to Rome and is imprisoned, and he writes these letters to churches that he had previously visited, and our faith is so greatly enhanced by those letters written there. We are spiritually enriched so much because things didn't go the way Paul had planned for them to go. But not only that, we note how Paul responded to that. He could have just thrown up his hands and said, well, forget it. This isn't going right. And he just kind of, pitches a fit, whatever. But he doesn't do that. He does not do that. He keeps going, seizes the opportunities that come his way, and continues to serve the Lord. In 1975, there was a concert performed in Cologne, Germany by a jazz pianist that turned out to be the concert that defines this musician's life. Unless you're a jazz fan, you won't recognize the name of Keith Jarrett, but he was traveling to Cologne, and what's interesting here is that this concert was arranged by a teenage promoter, a young woman in Cologne who was trying to bring good musical acts to her home city. And so when Mr. Jarrett was going to come, he had specifications about what he wanted. And to make a longer story short, when he arrives, he finds out that the piano that's available was not at all the one that he had specified. As a matter of fact, this piano had been found to be in horrible shape. They'd been working on it all day long to tune it, hours to tune it, and even when they got it in its best working condition, the upper range and the lower range of the piano both were not up to par. And just that middle range of notes, I'm not a piano player, so just that middle range of notes actually even worked the way they were supposed to. And so his initial response was, well, forget it. I'm not going to do this. I have a plan for my concert, the music that I want to play, and this piano just isn't able to do what I need it to do. But at the persistence of this teenage girl, he agreed to go ahead and do it. As a matter of fact, she had arranged for this concert to be recorded. And so what he had to do, he had to improvise, he had to innovate, he had to play differently than he had ever played before. And it turns out that his concert proved to be the defining moment of his career. It was his best work ever. And it changed his playing from that point forward. Now, if he had gone with his initial impulse, it would have never happened, and his career would have taken a completely different trajectory. Say that simply to remind us that we are in a circumstance that we would not have chosen. This is not according to our preference. This isn't what we want. This is not what we would rather be doing. So how are we going to respond to that? That's the question. We can't change it, but we can make the very best of it that we can. And who knows? But what comes out of this entire experience, we'll look back on it and say, you know, that has become somewhat of a defining moment for ourselves personally, for our families, for our church, for our community, whatever that might be. Life just doesn't always go the way we want it to go. But if we'll persist and we'll make the very best of it, who knows? It could turn out much better than it would have ever been before.